All right. Today we are chatting with Gabi Steele, the co-founder and CEO of Preql. In a nutshell, Preql is a no-code tool for business users to define and manage metrics. There's a lot to unpack there, and I'm sure Gabi will teach us all about it. A little bit about Gabi's background. Really, her background spans from painting, design, doing data viz at the Washington Post, teaching at universities, building communities. Pause for breath because there's a few more that are really exciting. Managing data teams at WeWork and co-founding various companies. So needless to say, Gabi, we're really excited to dive into it all. So thank you for joining us.
So happy to be here, Parker. Thank you. Appreciate the intro.
And did I butcher the intro? Are all those things true?
All of those things are true. There's some, back and forth in time, but I think that for the most part, you caught everything. And yeah, like those are the big notes that you hit on. So thank you. I can double click on any of them if one
It's
point
a
should be interesting.
it's a wild background, but all of those things kind of build them together in Legos and they make sense that you are a CEO of a data company.
Correct,
Yeah,
exactly. And I think like the best kind of leaders come from multidisciplinary places. And a big part of the work that my co-founder Leah and I have done over the years is bringing together people who come from different industries and have had like varied experiences. And that's obviously close to home for us. But yeah, I cut you off, so go ahead.
I think when you said home, so let's double click on that a little bit. So you've lived in New York for over a decade, right? So on a scale of 1 to 10, how much pride do you have in being a New Yorker? Like, is New York yours, Prequel's forever home?
What a good question. And it goes even deeper into sort of my background because I am an American citizen, but I also have passports to a few other places. I grew up in the UK. My parents are
Oh,
Canadian, so I inherited that citizenship. I've spent a lot of time in Tel Aviv. We actually have a team over there, which not to go so far into that at this moment, but
Mhm.
New York is a wonderful place to build companies, I think. And if we are going to be based in the United States, which is the immediate term plan, I do think we will forever have an HQ here. And not to bash San Francisco at all, but it feels like,
do it.
again, and
No,
I know the partner might be out there yet. But yeah, no, New York is absolutely home in so many ways. And I think just like post COVID as well, we've seen this city come to life in such an exciting way. I did work for the
Mm.
Washington Post previously, so I've been like East Coast. And then before that, also at WeWork. So Leah and I, my co-founder, we work together at WeWork, a block away
oh,
from our
cool.
existing offices. Yeah, I guess it's a big part of the story as well. So yeah, I would say the short answer, because it would be for sure Prequel's found a home here, but we do have teams and folks working for us in lots of different places, as well as customers that are, GDPR is one of the things that has been a priority for us because we've got folks in the UK. I know you're based in the UK, is that right?
Yeah. I live in London, so that's why, like, when if I ever have when I get asked this question, if you ever have to move to the US, where for me the unequivocal answer is New York, because it just feels much more like London.
London 2.0.
And London 2.0, you have the subway, you have the roads, you have people very similar to how things are in London. So yeah, and it's also a good time zone between mainland Europe and the West Coast. So I can totally see myself being in New York.
We'd love we'd love to have you here. So you're always welcome. Be in touch if whenever you're out here next.
So it's before we kind of jump into more stuff that you do at Prequel. Um, so a very curious question: outside of your busy life, what do you do actually enjoy as a hobby? What do you do? What do you enjoy doing?
First of all, I love that this podcast is not solely focused on data, which is a lot more fun. And whenever Leah and I talk about this work, we think about that. What do I enjoy doing? So this is part of the intro, but my first degree, I studied oil painting, which is
Hmm.
definitely a pivot from what I do today. But I do think the skill of creativity and being able to like make something from scratch and use your hands and that kind of thing has impacted not just that, also like whenever if anyone has ever taken an art class or done that sort of work, there's a component of critiquing the work, talking about other people's work and talking about your own that I think is incredible prep for being a founder pitching to VCs. So early in my career, I did that, almost professionally. I was never a professional painter. I was not that talented, but I did study it. So in my free time, when there's an option to attend a painting class or, actually work with my hands, step away from the computer, I love to do that. I practice yoga when possible. I went on a run this morning over the Williamsburg Bridge and back, which I'm like pretty proud of. So those are things I like to do. And then, yeah, a lot of stuff around community building, I think has always been really important to us. So some of that is bringing together folks in the data world, bringing like more voices into technology. And then some of it is totally unrelated and just bringing together great folks who want to talk about meaningful problems in the world. So yeah, that's what I like to do.
So it sounds like it's like the classic you connecting the dots. You start at some point and then you moved on to other points. They don't necessarily make sense at that point, but when you kind of look at it now, it probably makes a lot of sense. What would you say are like the transferable skills you acquired as you kind of went through that makes you who you are today?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've not even intentionally been bringing this up a bunch. I think, and young people ask all the time, and not that I'm not also a young person, but I'm not as young as people might think. But people ask all the time, like, how did you end up in this space? And like, obviously, when I graduated high school or even college, like being a data visualization engineer was not a role that was exactly accessible. It's like, as I continued on this path and took more risks and experienced more things, the professional field in which data was such an important part of so many companies unfolded, and I was able to take on these roles. I graduated from Parsons School of Design, having come from the design route with a data visualization master's degree, and only then did a role open up. I was the first to become a data visualization specialist on this specific team at the Washington Post that was based in New York and so on. And then I started a data visualization engineering team at WeWork with my co-founder, Leah Weiss, who I was the first data viz person she'd met. So I think the number one like piece of advice or thing that like held close to me was just being able to be kind of unafraid to be the first to do things, unafraid of things that might not seem like they'd been a part of the professional world before. It's not the typical background of going into law or medicine. Like I was just kind of saying yes to everything. And as someone that I think would have gotten a little bit bored it's like so stuck in a single career path, it really worked out well for me because the world changed so quickly and these jobs became so important. And then I got to be at the forefront of them. And also like as data science as a field unfolded, I think a lot of people who had come from academia, PhDs in physics and astrophysics, like those are the folks that actually helped build the beginning of the data science world. So my background, having studied painting and being a communicator, I always say that's like my number one skill, then translated so well to being the communicator on an engineering team. So everything I learned in everything that I had studied, done, participated in to date has made me that much better of a person to be a leader in the data world and doing the work that we do today. And I'm grateful for that. It wasn't part of the plan.
Fascinating.
For sure. I'm
Very
not that
fascinating.
Yeah.
And last year, I met you because I was running a conference. If you don't remember that, that's totally fine. But
I remember well. Yeah.
that's when I learned about you. That's when I learned about Preql and your co-founder, Leah. And I knew that you guys were co-CEOs, but it became very clear that you guys really, executed everything together. Like you were CC'd on every single email. One of you guys would respond to me one day, the other would respond to me the next day. So you really act as a 1-2 punch. And I'm wondering what that experience has been being a co-CEO. And I just kind of want to know all about it.
I love that. I love that you know us a little bit and have worked with us. And we've never been called a 1-2 punch, but I think that's exactly what that relationship has done. And I think, listen, like this building companies thing is tricky, and like being so isolated as a founder is tricky. And I look to folks that have done it on their own, and I'm so impressed. But the partnership that Leah and I were able to build initially at WeWork. So the story began where she hired me from the Washington Post to join her data product function. Leah was a very early employee at WeWork and had basically worked on every version of that data team and came from more of a like data engineering background, though she had learned SQL on the job and had studied German and history in undergrad. So again, non-traditional data, so to speak, but more of data engineering, and then brought me to help socialize and visualize a lot of the work she had done on that side. And we were able to really empower one another and like escalate or elevate each other's voices within that organization. And through that partnership, we went on to build Data Culture, which is a data engineering consultancy. We founded that towards the end of 2019. It still exists today. We have a new CEO running that organization. It's extremely successful. Unlike Prequel, it's profitable, all of those things. And the partnership that we built there was one where we did do everything together. We're not the same. We don't come from exactly the same background. We have different skill sets. We may look similarly. People may get us confused. However, that is absolutely not what makes us powerful. Like we were very much in communication at all times. And when it came to fundraising and being in the room with venture capitalists who are a tricky bunch in a lot of ways, and especially as like two women, we were told so many times, it's not traditional to have two co-CEOs, and most
Boo-hoo.
CEOs look like most, of all the CEOs on the NASDAQ, the IPO'd companies, 2%, there's 2% of venture funding goes to women. More men named David are CEOs than women. Like, of course.
Wait, is that real? Is that a real thing?
Real fact.
Yeah,
Real.
it's a real thing. It's a real thing.
David. Okay, that's funny.
I'm not called David, and I'm a co-CEO. And also venture capital, yes, you're giving us all this money, but we're the ones doing the hard work, and we know how to do it our way. So I think so much of the success and that we've been able to achieve is through the partnership and also the fun. It's light. It's like we're not just working with a team of people. These are people that we really believe in through the relationship we've built. And one of our core beliefs was we want to create an environment where people can bring their full selves to work the way we can bring ourselves to work. And I think we've been able to do that. I don't think it would have been possible if just one of us was the solo leader. So we made the decision when we raised money for Prequel. We've been co-CEOs. We've been running this equal playing field. We know what she owns. We know what I own. It's very clear to us. We can communicate that down. Let's not change it just because some guy thinks that it doesn't fit the mold of a pattern in which companies are built. And we are trying to build something different, both from a technology standpoint and from a culture standpoint.
No, that's really, really important because I think as you know, we all know when you are founders, when you're working with venture capitalists, there are lots of because it has been done before. This is the way it has to be done. So there is a lot of that, and that's you're becoming a weighted average of other averages in the process. So it's really great that you know what works and you stick to it and make sure that that's the way it works. As we kind of change gears a little bit, and I think this was a question for me because even though I've studied engineering, I always love various different ways that people visualize data. And there are so many different ways that you can communicate something through an efficient visualization. So what are some of the best data visualizations you've created at the Washington Post? I just out of sheer curiosity, I would like to check it out.
Yeah, so I think, first of all, my time there was around the 2016 election. And I wasn't sure with this question also if you were going to ask, what is the best type? People want best practices. My favorite pieces that came out of WAPO around that time, obviously there was a ton of stuff around Hillary, Trump. There was this infamous, I think it was the New York Times, was it going to be Trump or Hillary, needle. But, and those pieces are totally effective in a lot of ways. They're burned in people's memories, this red, blue lines. But I really love the pieces that were layered with video footage. There's a piece, right. I can send the link afterwards. It was about, I'm trying to remember exactly. It was it was called Crossing Borders, Border Boundaries. And it had layered footage. And as you scrolled, this is very popular around that time, called scrolly telling. So you're scrolling with your mouse and the images are changing and lines are coming across the screen and bar charts are growing. And one of the big issues with data visualizations for audiences is you need to educate your users on how to actually play with them because no one's seen this before, right? It's never been done.
Yeah.
And for newspaper audiences, often it's an older population, people that are used to reading something in print. So you don't want to teach people how to like click and play with things like a video game. They don't have time. They just want to
Mm.
see the visuals. And it's like, how do you reduce bounce rates, right? And keep them on the page for the longest. So this phenomenon that came up was this like scrolly telling, where as your mouse scrolls, things are just happening and it's an immersive experience. And there was a few pieces around that time and that have continued. I have a close friend, Umi Siam, who's at the New York Times actually, and has done a ton of work around this kind of mixed media visualizations. It also
Right.
goes back to like my world where I was studying oil painting. Then I got into data visualization and storytelling, and I learned to code and I learned statistics. And I think the most effective ways to get through to broad audiences is to use as many different kind of channels and mixed media, multifaceted ways. Also, you want to make things accessible. You want it to not have limitations when it comes to color. So folks that are colorblind can see it, folks that might not
Yeah.
even be able to see at all. So I think what's cool about these pieces is there's a sound component and it drives you through the work. So I'd be happy to share some of the work that I love the most from that time. And the other piece that I think is meaningful to bring up is a piece that came out of Periscope. It's about gun violence. I'm not sure if you all have seen it. It's like
Oh,
these
I did see that actually. That was in one of your presentations.
So I gave talks for many years about data visualization work, and I still do at times, but the pieces that are really effective and timeless. So that piece came out in 2013, okay, 10 years ago now. And it's just incredible. It talks about gun violence in the United States, and each line drawn in an arc shape represents a life cut short.
Mm.
And as the line is drawn, and this again speaks to what I was just describing around like teaching users what they're seeing, the line goes across the screen and then it drops at a moment, when those years ended, and some drop very quickly and a little ball drops. And then it also shows the continuation. So the line is sort of like an orangey, like light color, and then it goes gray.
Mm.
The years that were not finished. And it uses a calculation, like an algorithm, which is all the years that would have been had that person lived a full life and it hadn't been cut short by the unfortunate circumstance in which they were shot down, they were killed. So it's interesting for a few reasons. One of them is a big piece about, and I can talk about this for a really long time, so you can pause if
Yeah, no, keep it up. This is
No,
interesting.
keep
Okay, so
keep it
so
going.
the other thing that's really interesting here is we're thinking about these lines, right? And the data set originally only had the years these people lived, right? When they were born, when they died, how they died. But what the developer does is they add on hundreds of data points to calculate the years in which the person was not able to live their full life, which kind of goes against a lot of the like core beliefs of data visualization, where you should only show the marks on the page that are most required, right? It should be limited. It should be minimalist. This is a maximalist piece, and it's incredibly effective. So it also breaks some of the rules that you might have seen in learning about visualizations, but is that much more effective. And I like to break rules. And I think what's really exciting about the artistic side of the data world, the data viz world, is to think outside the box a little bit. And you can kind of play with those ideas while also doing things that are intuitive. So the user can quickly learn how this piece works. And there's a real emotional point to it. And I ask audiences when I talk about this work, I say, what do you see when you're looking at this? What stands out to you? And there's so many intuitive things that they've done. Like I talk about these little lines, and what do those silver lines look like? Well, they look like gray hairs to me, right? The gray hairs of the people that they look like after, like, all these things that you just can't possibly gauge from numbers. And humans, the way that we read visuals is that
Mm.
much faster and more powerful than that of like text or tabular charts, which maybe leads into Preql in some ways because it's a data access tool and we're also trying to simplify things. But yeah, I've done a lot of talking about the different ways to visualize information and the impact. And I think that's only going to grow over the years. And I think data viz journalism has been one of the best ways that visualizations have come to life over the past 15, 20 years. But there's a whole new era coming forward now where we're moving a little bit beyond what a typical BI tool does, what a bar chart does, what we've seen in Looker, what we've seen in, Mode Analytics is a really successful one
Mm.
as well. They were just bought by ThoughtSpot, built by some friends of ours and investors. So there's a lot of different ways that people are leveraging this idea of being able to put visuals in front of others to represent information. But nothing, I think, beats what comes out of journalism still.
I have so many more questions about data journalism stuff, but just we need you to send us the links so we can look at them, and we'll post those when we post the podcast too, because those are so cool. Especially last comment on this.
You have captivated your audience.
The ones that I saw during COVID. The COVID ones were crazy because it was like, okay, they're reporting on data from yesterday, and they have thousands of data points, and like part of me was like, no one slept. And they produce incredible work. Also, I don't even know if these are accurate in the sense, like, how could they do that much in 24 hours? So I'm just curious, like, what was your experience when it's like, okay, this story needs to be out now. Gabi, we need you to do all this and make it perfect. Like, what was that experience doing all of that in like a 2-day time frame?
Yeah, it was often like whatever, in a matter of hours. There's a few different, so there's some exciting things, and I'm going to go back a little bit and like give you some of the like how data visualizations come to be. So the work we did initially in 2016 Washington Post Times was like over 6-week periods. Like these pieces took many, at least 6 weeks. I mean, to build, to design. The data sets weren't that big. We tried different things. When it came to COVID, those numbers are changing all the time. Like even police violence, fortunately, like there were some exciting pieces around that, or very like impactful pieces, I would say. The numbers don't change. They do change daily in the United States, and it's terrible, but it's not as dramatic, obviously, as COVID. So what I was saying earlier about data visualization pieces being timeless in a lot of ways, I always described the practice of data visualization, because the most common question I always got asked was, what is data visualization? Can you tell us more? Like whether it was people in my family or, my parents and their friends, or whether it was people in the outside world who actually had been familiar with tech. Data visualization is a combination of 3 disciplines. It's the data science, statistics, kind of numbers. How do we think about data? It's graphic design, my original background. It's being able to map shapes to numbers, right? So we can understand them. And then it's code. It's writing front-end engineering code a lot of the time. What we're talking about here is like websites. It's like, how do you update this? So the beauty of the code side, and why it makes sense to have, deep understanding of all 3 disciplines, is that you can then upload live data, which is a lot of the work I'm doing now on the sort of like the Preql data analytics side, into something that's been pre-built. So with the COVID pieces, once it was designed and once we knew, okay, we want to map every new COVID patient to a circular whatever shape, and we'll just keep adding discs or whatever it is, or it's a growing circle based on location, geography, the intensity of the cases, the mortality rates, you can then just keep loading in more and more numbers. So it needs to be robust enough, and it needs to also be able to like take in all of that live data. It needs to hook up often to like a live data warehouse or a data source, but you don't need to redesign it on a daily basis. And so we would incrementally make changes to the designs, but once the initial piece was done, you didn't actually need to change it as every number flowed in. And then also there's like the clocking of new numbers, like you would always see. There's that Union Square in New York City, and we're talking about New York. There's like a number, and people never know what it is, but I'm pretty sure it's just the time. And it's been around since I grew up here. Anyway, it's always changing. And I think that's really impactful as well. Like when numbers can translate into something that's emotive, like an emotional feeling as well. So COVID was an incredibly emotional period, and the way that we were able to visualize what everybody was going through, but also just keeping people up to date, could only be done by having skill sets in those 3 areas. Because you can build a static chart that's effective, but you'd have to rebuild it every day. That would never work during COVID. You can build something that's dynamic and changes every day, but is ugly and doesn't connect with anyone and doesn't have that like silver hair, silver line feeling. It has nothing to do with like the human lives that we're talking about being lost during this period. You need to have the design component as well. And if you don't have the data, then none of this matters. You're just building a website basically, which is also a great skill, but like web design is not data visualization. So it's extremely exciting. And I think it's really still the beginning of that period. But yeah.
So we've talked your ear off about stuff that has nothing to do with Preql. So now, but now I'm curious if you could just give us an intro to Preql, what it is right now, what you think it's going to be, all that.
Yeah. So I mentioned my background. My co-founder, Leo Weiss, and I spent the bulk of our careers, the past 10 years, specifically focused on building solutions for organizations to get more value from their data, building solutions that empowered not just engineers, but folks that actually needed the data to make a decision, because all of the money that we pour into building data infrastructure and getting access to data isn't valuable unless the person that requires that number, that piece of information,
Mm.
has access to it in the moment they're making a decision. And that's kind of been lost, I think, in a lot of the modern data stack world. However, the modern data stack has allowed this amazing platform for new technologies to be built, right? Which is common. Like, that's part of the cycle. That's part of the data viz cycle too. So on top of Snowflake being the most affordable dynamic data cloud storage warehouse solution, on top of Fivetran, the data ingestion tool that helped us bring in seconds all this information to your warehouse, dbt, open source language where people can, build the SQL transformations, the code, the scripts, so that they can actually get data that they need into a visualization tool. That was the foundation. That was what we implemented at Data Culture, the consultancy, time and time again. I know Paradime fits into that as well and is more on the developer open source side, and I can talk more about that. What we realized before we built Preql, and the reason we built Preql, was the tension between business teams and data teams when implementing a modern data stack was so intense that the problem of business users actually being able to access their data and manage their own business logic was impossible, for the reason that in order to transform data into metrics that business users can access and make sense of, SQL needs to be written, which business users can't do. So the data teams own the SQL, the business users own the business logic, and there's a forever back and forth. And it takes a really long time to implement the business logic, to join all the data sources that matter into a semantic layer, some sort of like English language layer that people can pull from. So that's how we came up with the solution of Preql. And Preql does three things. It connects to your data warehouse and offers you out-of-the-box metrics, transformed, pre-transformed based on your data sources. We saw very, very frequently that companies within the same vertical actually care about the same
Yeah.
things. And a lot of these open source languages, dbt labs amongst them, make it very easy for us to like structure that data. So that's the number one thing. We allow for metric management, and any change that you make in Preql on our UI also updates code in the warehouse. So that's kind of the beauty. We're talking to two audiences here. It's also a data governance tool. It allows people to be able to manage those metrics and say, this finance team has access to certain reports, this team has access to others. And then it's honestly a data cataloging solution as well. So it allows you to see all of the definitions of the metrics you care most about in a UI. Preql is the tool that sits on top of your data warehouse. We also do managed services, empowering specifically business teams to access the data that they need. It is not a visualization tool. We don't build charts and graphs, which is interesting given my background, but I feel very strongly that there's a lot of problems in the modern data stack space that are solved. And I'm really
Yeah.
proud of folks that have solved them. I love what Fivetran has done. I love what Snowflake has done. I really appreciate the field of analytics engineering and what's been done there, as I do visualization tools. The issue of business users not being able to manage their own business logic, to us, feels unsolved. So the reason that we built this product is for that. And the bottom line of what it does, I've gone deep into this, but in sort of like one line, it's a metric management tool for business users that allows them to access data directly from its source systems and create complex metrics on top of that. Anyone can pull down those metrics, and you can always trace back the lineage, how they're being found, but totally no code. No SQLs required. At the same time, we do generate SQL or dbt or whatever code it is in the warehouse. As a data team person, I have ripped out all tricks one time too many. I do not want to deal with more of these tools that do. We've seen a lot of tools in the space do business logic, and we've seen a lot of the tools in the space help engineers. What we do is focus solely on the business user while integrating with the process of data teams.
Absolutely. Like the Stripe schema doesn't change. The Salesforce schema doesn't change that much. The HubSpot schema or the Intercom schema doesn't change that much. But once you have done all the math of computing MRR and ARR from Stripe, there is zero added value of doing it all over again unless you're running a very complex pricing model that requires bespoke coding, right?
Totally. And I hope that even that can be done with Preql. Like, we have a sort of like, there's this other thing we do, which we ingest SQL to Preql. So folks that have already done that complex code they can then move it into Prequel, and then your business logic layer is preserved. Should you want to switch from one warehouse to another? Should you want to move from one BI tool to another? Should your sales
Mm,
team not require 50 Tableau licenses in order for them to just pull numbers into spreadsheets? So we integrate with Google Sheets. We let you download it to a CSV. We're totally agnostic on what you want to do in terms of consumption. You can also push
yeah.
it into Tableau. You can push it into Sigma Computing. But our goal is to make sure that everybody has a reliable metric layer. So yeah, it's our take on a problem that we just felt we couldn't ignore any further. And that's why
Mm.
we sort of stepped away from we'd been solving it manually at the consultancy. And if you need help and you want to do custom work, they still can help you. But I think at the end of the day, like the long-term solution for business users is to be able to manage their own business logic. It sounds simple, but most tools don't allow for that.
And what are I mean, I think you touched upon it a bit around the problems business users face when they're interacting with their data team. If you dive a little bit deeper on that, what are like the top 2 or 3 challenges that you are hearing why somebody would want to use Prequel? Because is it like, okay, it takes me 10 days to get one metric added, or things like that? So what are some of the things that you are hearing that makes you like, okay, really bullish, like this is the problem to solve?
I really appreciate that question. Yeah. So the work that I've done obviously at Data Culture over the years was enough to prove that this is a massive problem. But what we're seeing now in customers with Prequel, we tend to sell to sales and revenue operations teams or business operations teams, marketing operations teams, folks that are having that exact issue where it's taking them weeks and months to pull a simple metric. And they're constantly, there's like 3 areas that I can speak through here. One is they're facing a data bottleneck. There's one person on their
Mm,
data team. There's one data resource allocated to RevOps that's pulling that number in SQL, and it's changing every day. So they need to ask. It's like the opposite of the COVID visualization, right? It's like if they keep pulling the same number, and data's not useful if you can't get it in the moment when you're making a decision. That's number one, the bottleneck problem. Then there's another crazy problem that many companies face, which is if I were to go to your finance team and your product team and your marketing team and say, what is revenue today? What's our ARR?
oh yeah, this is
They're
classic.
the same. Would everyone have the same number? How you are running an organization of 1,000 employees, $50 million, whatever it is, like huge companies and smaller organizations, and you don't have a single metric or a single source of truth for ARR, it's like incredibly frustrating. So that's like the number one use case. Folks come to us and say, like, I can't measure anything in order to do my job, and I'm completely reliant on X, Y, and Z. Please help me. And I'm paying this much money to Tableau, this much money to this data provider. Every team has a different tool. Like,
Mm,
how do we get organized here? And then the last one is like you go to a meeting and you have like someone brings in, okay, this is what LTV is and this is what CAC is, and we're going to do, this next month. And they're like, hold on a second. Where did you pull that from? Like what? And the entire meeting gets derailed for the team, and no one can run their
yeah.
company based on the data. So Prequel is a really good solution for all of those things. We also hear constantly, from sales teams, like we don't need complex data visualizations. We need access to reliable metrics. We know how we want to measure things. Our metrics are changing constantly. We want to add a new data source. Even just Salesforce and Zendesk all in one place that's flexible. It would be awesome for that to just be like accessible. So data access is a major, major issue that a lot of companies have, and they can then manage it through Prequel. And then as changes are made to metrics, it can either hit a data team as a PR request, or you can have an
Mm,
admin that's no code. We like have different levels of permissioning, and that's the governance side. It's data governance, data access, metric management. Those are the 3.
gotcha.
And last question on that, what do you see, where do you see Prequel in 2 years if you had a crystal ball?
I like that. Obviously widely adopted and used by
The
almost
biggest company
everyone.
in the world, largest
Yeah.
female-led co-CEO company in the world.
Me and Nick are at the NASDAQ, and we're like, holy shit, we did it in 2 years. They said it was going to take 7. I think so. What we're trying to do with Prequel is automate the process of data modeling and make it so that data teams can work on much more interesting problems than metric management. Data people are smart. We've been data people. they could be doing really exciting like AI work, that this is an amazing age for data. So what we hope is that as many organizations as possible can not necessarily reduce the size of their data teams, but redistribute resources so that data people are working on predictive analytics and furthering the entire product of the organization in ways that very few companies have been able to do today. There's I would say a handful of FANG type orgs that are truly data driven. And Preql is this single source of truth layer where people are actually finally able to trust ARR and trust the numbers that are required to be, any kind of company today. You can't really be an organization that's successful without measuring these things. And also change the way that sales folks use numbers, marketing people use numbers. Intuition is great, but it would be that much better if people were actually data driven. And I think this idea that companies need to be data driven is something that's come up throughout my entire career. And then when we founded Preql, it was so obvious that it still wasn't the case. So I'm hoping that with all of the exciting technology that we're seeing coming out there, Preql will also have adopted as many of the sort of natural language solutions. We built a product for business teams. It's much easier for them to say, I want to define this metric as versus drag and drop solutions. So it's a really, really exciting age for us. And we just want to help as many companies and people as possible be able to trust their numbers and trust the data that they already are paying to store and ingest and access.
Amazing. I think that's a great vision to have, because it takes so long sometimes that you need a single piece of information, and then people stall you for weeks, at which point you try to find a workaround yourself and go around getting it. I have been in situations where I need daily active users and 3 teams give me 3 different numbers. And the worst is that the number I had 3 weeks ago has now changed a little bit.
Exactly.
3 weeks ago, it was 98,820. And today I get the same number 3 weeks ago as 98,800. So where did those 20 go? And now you are in a rabbit hole going around in circles.
It's madness. And it's why are we spending so much money and all these smart people? And the business team thinks the data team is ridiculous and stupid. The data team, it's just very frustrating. No one's speaking the same language. And I think it's just long overdue. And people seem to run away from hard problems a lot of the time. And we feel crazy that we did the opposite. We ran towards the problem that was the hardest and we were yelled at most for. But it feels like it's the right moment, and it just hasn't been until now. Honestly, I don't think we could have started it sooner. I think if anything, we're a touch early, but
you'd also need the right technology advancements that are happening right now with LLMs and all of these to be present to actually craft a solution that fits the time and the use case,
Exactly. So we feel really lucky about that. And we don't brand the product as generative AI, and kind of we're trying not to.
You didn't change it to Preql.ai? That hasn't happened yet?
So
Next funding round, do that. I hear it's helpful.
So that's exactly what they're saying. And if you ever have Leah Weiss on this podcast, or you have both of us together, she would say hard no, and I'll be like, maybe. We've got different stories. But yeah, she's incredibly realistic.
I have for many years shied away from using the word AI, because it's it can mean a whole lot of things. Or machine learning is are we just doing multivariate regression, or are we doing really machine learning? Well, I think one last question before we sort of wrap up. You are currently a professor of design at Parsons. How do you make time for teaching, and what do you teach? What's your class like?
I'll be really honest with you. I'm not teaching this semester, thank God. But
yeah, I was shocked. I'm that doesn't sound possible.
Yeah. So I did this master's degree in data visualization at Parsons, and Parsons is an incredible university, but they don't offer PhDs. So I immediately was brought into teaching, and so few people have data visualization degrees that similarly Columbia University brought me in to do applied science degrees, and made an exception because you really need to have a PhD to teach at Columbia, and NYU wrote. I created a curriculum this is really the trick. I created a curriculum at Parsons for data visualization, entry to data visualization careers, et cetera. And it's a recording of me that many people watch and get involved with. But
so it's an on-demand course?
It's taught by different professors, but they watch videos each week of me, and then someone grades the papers. So that's the trick.
That's
However,
perfect.
I did get an email that I teach like once in a while, when there's time, I like extra additional whatever hours, or I know I'm going to be in New York, because the trickiest thing is like I travel a lot. There's a lot of different,
Mm.
I think we met at a conference. Like I
Yeah.
try to cover as many of those as possible. But the other thing I'll say on this note is one thing that didn't come up in the background that I probably shared is Leah and I wrote a curriculum for Carly Kloss's Code with Klossy program, data science for 13 to 18-year-old young women. It's free. We
Oh,
taught it
cool.
ourselves during
Oh, that's
COVID,
cool.
which was, I will say, what the hardest thing we've ever done, which is hilarious that was it. But it was 2 weeks back to back, and we taught 2 separate cohorts of campers, of students, of fellows who now come back and watch our webinars and participate in Preql stuff. And it's the most rewarding thing. And similarly to my work at Parsons with that curriculum, it continues to be taught. We also created a curriculum for educators from Teach From America. That's who they bring in. So Code with Klossy now has a data science curriculum. It's got a lot of data viz in there. And it's honestly amazing what these young people can do. It's a very similar curriculum to what Parsons I've written, because they're very capable. And while we were at
Yeah.
WeWork, we also ran a data innovation training program called Data Cult, which graduated over 1,000 employees, adults around the world. And then it turned into data culture. And so like teaching is a huge part of everything we've done. And I think as to women in the space, like it's not even a question that we want to bring more voices. And the best way to do that is to educate others, whether it's the
Yeah.
13 to 19-year-old young women identifying young girls, or folks at Parsons, or folks in more kind of corporate environments. So I think it's really important to make time for that and give as many talks as possible. And but this semester I'm not teaching. Side note,
Lots of updates on Preql coming soon then.
hopefully.
Well, it was great to talk to you. Great to get to know you a little better. And I'm sure we'll see you at some conference, something in the near future.
Definitely. Keep me posted, Parker. It was great to see you again. Such a pleasure to be here. I'm so glad that our FaceTime, because moment a little while back led to this.
We were both working. Where we both worked through the meeting.
Yeah,
essentially.
I'm so busy right now. Yeah, but that's part of like true founder
Exactly.
friendship, I would say.
We were in the meeting where we both worked on our separate problems.
But I think it all worked out for both of us, and I've heard really
Exactly.
positive things from my team about your team, and I'd love to do more stuff together. So thank you so much. This was great.
Awesome.
Thanks
Great
for
talking to
coming,
you.
and thanks for spending time with us. Thanks so much.
See ya.
See ya.
That was awesome. Gabi's so fun to talk to.
It's getting better and better. We are finding better and better people.
I know. It's a mix of getting better people and just slowly but surely just us realizing, the topics, and just realizing, oh, we don't need to take this too serious. That was the main feedback I got when my friends were listening to this. They're like, dude, chill. I was like, yeah, that's a good point.
And also not talking about that much about how you build metrics and how you do this and data contracts and this and that. I think there are enough people talking about it, and then there are enough people getting too serious about it. And all of that. I don't think we need to, because I think there is enough material on that.
On a separate note, I want to get your opinion on my idea for Coalesce. So while I was hearing Gabi talk, my idea, since she explained Preql so simply, and my idea is dress up like I'm 5, and then go around to CEOs or people high up in the companies and ask them to explain their data company as if I were 5.
Exactly. That's pretty
exactly
cool.
meaning. But no, I'll have one of those spinning hats, and I'll have overalls and a microphone, and I'll have them explain it like I'm 5, and I'll have a little Paradime, badge.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a fantastic idea. There are 41 booths, 41 people, 41 companies to speak to. And if there are 41 sponsors, there's probably 41 booths at least.
Perfect.
So if you're there for 3 days, that's like 13 Tiny Mic interviews per day. That's a lot.
And we'll find out. Yeah. Or maybe people are creeped out. That was my concern. Like, okay, this could be good. Or people are creeped out that a 30-year-old man is dressed up as a 5-year-old. So that's TBD. Luckily, it's like Halloween. So costumes
Super Mario
make
Brothers.
sense.
That's
exactly.
like Super Mario Brothers.
Yeah, I'm like, no. I'm dressed up as Mario.
Yeah,
Come on.
exactly. I'm Mario from Paradime. You can actually say that. It's like I'm Mario from Paradime. That's our. So I think it's a fantastic idea. And what we should do is, if not anything, we should look. Snowflake, we saw like these conferences are great for partnerships. They're not great for like individual customer introductions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think building up on that ton of content around partnerships itself gives you access to more wider network of customers. So directly or indirectly, it increases our reach to other to people who are associated with those brands.
I like this. We pretty much just brought the listeners into our one-on-one.
Exactly.
There we have it. Awesome.
Yeah,
Well, on that note, we are heading over to our one-on-one right now. So
yeah, let's go to our one-on-one.
I guess we'll shut off the podcast. And everyone, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. And we'll have another episode up next week.
See ya.
See ya.